Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang with Morsels of a Thought number 1465. Let me get these technical difficulties settled here. Hey, hey, hey. There we go. One of them. Come on. There we go. Better. All right. I needed that. And, hold on. Gotta set things up here. We are reading The R Factor by Ken Ashby and Maris Segal. We are reading The R Factor. Discover the universal rhythms for leading prosperous relationships. Evolving our human relationship story. The R Factor, evolving our human relationship story. We're on chapter 8. Communicate. When communication and expectations are aligned, magic happens. Wow. We're trying to bring you morsels of a thought of wisdom. Knowing the right thing to do is wisdom, and the fortune cookie said that doing it is virtue. And so I want to bring more virtue into this world by giving you morsels of a thought. I want to inspire you to have a great day with them and to impart something good and to entertain a little and to possibly educate the world. When communication and expectations are aligned, magic happens, say the authors Ken Ashby and Maris Segal. The Hut, capital H, was a popular eating establishment due to its authentic Caribbean cuisine and island decor, and because the patrons were always greeted by Winston, the chef or owner, who stood tall with colorful beads in his braided hair and a broad, infectious smile. I want to make sure that you can see that word national bestseller up here. Can you see that? I think you can now. Okay, sorry. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. I was not totally on time today, as you can tell. Okay, so the Hut was a popular eating establishment. Rich man, Winston exclaimed. It's been too long. We missed you last month. I thought I'd see you when the Pepper Tribe PT was playing. You know I love them, but I was out of town. Next time, though, I'll be sure to be here, Rich said to Winston, whom he had established a relationship with years before, both as a patron of his establishment and as a fellow musician who admired Winston's musical abilities on those occasions when he joined live bands that entertained at the Hut on the weekends. In the meantime, I'm ready for some of your famous jerk chicken. A quick swoop, a quick snap, a quick snap of Winston's finger summoned a server, who escorted them to a table for two. Enjoy, their server said, as he sat a plate of jerk chicken in front of Rich and a plate of shrimp in front of his father. Mild, just like you ordered. This looks so good. My mouth is watering already, Rich said, as he dug his fork into the seasoned meat and took a bite. Rich enjoyed the reggae music that was playing in the establishment while he enjoyed the rich, spicy flavors that were the hallmark of jerk cuisine. As he got lost in the food, his toes tapped in sync with the beat of the music. A few minutes later, he pulled himself out of his environment of the food and the environment and looked across. A few minutes later, he pulled himself out of his enjoyment of the food and the environment looked across the table. How's yours, Dad? He asked. Everything good? When his dad didn't answer right away, he leaned forward to see if something was wrong. That's when he noticed that his father's face was bright red and tiny beads of sweat were glistening above his brow. Is the food too spicy, Dad? He said, pushing a glass of ice water toward him. Have a drink, it'll help. After a quick sip, his father sat the glass down on the table and grimaced. You don't like the shrimp? Rich asked, concerned. No, it's not that. My chest, his dad said, suddenly struggling to speak as his hand clutched his chest. It hurts to breathe. Instantly concerned, Rich sprang to his father's side. Dad, are you okay? He asked frantically. Then, without waiting for a response, he yelled, Someone call 911! Hurry! Everything happened so quickly after that. The paramedics came and started an IV. They put an oxygen mask on his father and took his vitals. Rich knew it was serious by the way they rushed him out of the restaurant and wasted no time loading him into the ambulance. The mere thought of something being wrong with his father made Rich's heart race with fear. In the emergency department, Rich listened intently when the doctor confirmed that his father was having a heart attack, saying time was of the essence. He needed to get to the heart cath lab immediately so they could open any blockages or determine if he would need to have surgery. He's sedated right now, the doctor explained. As his next of kin, I need your approval to perform the procedure. Quickly glancing at the form in his hands, Rich could barely comprehend what was happening as he scribbled his signature at the bottom. We'll be taking him back in a minute, the doctor said. We'll keep you updated. Okay, what can I do? Rich asked, feeling helpless. If he has other family members, you should probably notify them. I'm sure they'd want to know. Someone will come out and give you updates throughout the procedure, the doctor informed him. Taking a seat in one of the chairs in the waiting room, Rich paused and took a couple deep breaths, a trick he'd learned as a performer to calm his nerves. Dreading reaching out to the siblings he rarely spoke to, his mind drifted as he contemplated what to say, with the anxiety of different outcomes popping into his mind. It was possible that this was a scare, nothing more, and there wasn't a need to alert his brother and sister just yet. But what if everything took a bad turn and their dad wouldn't make it through the procedure? Rich shook his head as if to erase that negative thought from his mind. Like it or not, Rich knew he owed it to them to let them know. It was their right to know, but still he procrastinated, buying time before placing the calls. He had just about convinced himself to wait until he'd received an update before calling. At least that way he'd have something concrete to tell them. When the doctor appeared in the waiting room, after directing him into a small conference room, he told him that stents had been successfully placed to reopen two of his father's main arteries as well as two other areas. They had saved his life, but damage had been done to his dad's heart that would require close observation, rehabilitation, and significant lifestyle changes. He's going to be limited in what he can do, and for the next couple months or so, he'll need assistance, at least until he can regain his strength. I know it isn't what you wanted to hear, but it could have been worse, and he's a strong man otherwise. It'll be a while before he's out of the woods completely, though, the doctor advised. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of him, Rich replied without hesitation. As his oldest son, it's my honor and my responsibility. To Rich, it was his responsibility alone. The twins were in Arizona and had lives of their own. In his mind, taking care of their dad was up to him, just as Rich had been charged with the responsibility of taking care of his brother and sister when they were growing up. While Rich had resented the twins' relationship with each other, he had never resented being the big brother and the one their dad always turned to. In fact, he prided himself on it. That was something that hadn't changed, and Rich vowed that it never would. Not much had changed between Rich and his father throughout the years, but so much had changed in the last 24 hours. That morning, he'd looked forward to visiting his dad, and this afternoon, he was faced with the after effects of almost losing the only person he'd been able to turn to and truly trust. He hadn't felt so alone since the day his mother had left, the day that had impacted all their lives and their relationships with each other forever. Although he was just 14 at the time, Rich stepped up and began to care for his brother and sister, who were 4 years younger. Now he owed it to his dad to let his brother and sister know about his condition. Rich realized it wasn't about what he wanted, it was about what his dad would want. In his mind, he recalled what his father had always said. Family comes first, and when I go, you kids get to stick together. Yet, this would be the first time that Rich reached out and communicated with either one of them in quite a while. It wasn't a call he wanted to make at all. But as the oldest son, he stood in his responsibility. Terry and Tim were both surprised to hear from him, but they were equally surprised with the news he shared. Both immediately expressed their desire to rush to their father's side. By the end of the call, they agreed to wait until their father was out of the hospital, saying they would be glad to make arrangements to come and help and take care of him. That night, Rich stayed at his father's house, the house they grew up in. Realizing how close he had come to losing his dad, he decided to go through his father's files, knowing his father had legal documents in place to address his health and finances in the event of serious illness, injury, or it would be nice to know where they were in the event they were necessary. As he thumbed through the files in his dad's bottom desk drawer, he came across an envelope that had his mother's name penned in the upper left corner, but it lacked a return address. His mouth dropped as he pulled out a very short, handwritten note dated nearly 30 years before. It is better this way. Take care of the kids. Someday I hope they'll understand. I will always love them. Seeing the words on the page started a flood of emotion. Memories washed over him as he recalled hearing the words from his dad, who read it to them all those years ago. Unable to sleep, Rich turned to his notebook and put his thoughts into lyrics. Rich's notebook. Do we really know or understand the power we all have in our hands? The answers beyond a twist of fate. The questions not if, but what we create. That's his notebook in his handwriting. It's kind of cool. Huh. All right. Reframing. In the rhythm of reframing, we lead with gratitude. We accept the traumas of our past without letting them limit us. We meet people where they are and honor feedback. When we reframe, a new perspective emerges and a shift happens. Isn't that the truth, though? Isn't that absolutely the truth? Reframing. I did that this morning with my dad. I used to have a iffy relationship with my adoptive father. And this morning I thought to myself, you know something? If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be who I am today. And he gave me the strength to fight and fight and fight. And although sometimes he was the in my life, in Yin Yang's life, if he hadn't been there, I would not have had to fight so hard for my confidence. And because I did fight that hard, I still have that in me. So it is who I am at the moment. It's going to change, but at the same time, I've been reframing that situation, condition, a relationship with this dad who was like a stepdad to me. He did give me a lot, and I reframed it to the point where it's much more positive than it was before. So just wanted to say that. Number 9, chapter 9, gratitude. Gratitude is the melody for the song of success. Gratitude. I'll read that again. Gratitude is the melody for the song of success. 8 days passed before Rich was arranging his father's release from the hospital. It had been a trying week as well as an emotional one. Every morning, Rich woke up with anxiety that would only be quelled after calling the nurse's station to hear how his father had been throughout the night. The news that he was stable always brought him a sigh of relief, and it wasn't until he had that reassurance himself that he would provide his sister and brother with the daily update. And he never missed a single opportunity to visit his father. He played guitar and read to his dad in the afternoon, which seemed a strange role reversal when his dad read to them as kids. Tim and Terry were very concerned, and he knew that their offer to fly in was sincere. Still, he assured them that he was fine and didn't need any help. Truth be told, if they did come, Rich had no idea how he would deal with them all being in one place. Now in his mid-40s, it had been years since they'd all been under one roof. He insisted that there was no reason for them to drop everything and rush to help. No reason at all. And every time he repeated that, the twins would tell him how much they appreciated everything he was doing for their dad. Although Rich assured them that they didn't need to come, Tim and Terry wouldn't take no for an answer and announced that they would be there before their dad was released from the hospital. They wanted to talk to the doctors with Rich and be there to help when their father went home. Rich, take the day off. We'll spend the day with him at the hospital today, they offered. You need a break, and we want to make sure we understand what he needs now, too. The words were met with resistance. Rich still didn't want and resisted their offers to help. Rather than being grateful, he resented them for stepping in. Somehow it brought up all the painful memories from their youth. His job was always being the big brother and protector. In the end, the three of them went to the hospital together, and once again, Rich felt out of place in the presence of the twins. His brother Tim had always been the sensitive one, and that hadn't changed. As he sat by his father's bedside and held his hand, he cried and expressed his regret for not being there when his dad needed him the most. And Rich interjected, reminding Tim not to upset their father. Terry, on the other hand, was busy taking notes and getting up to date on the doctor's instructions. What could he eat and couldn't he eat? What was he allowed to do? What couldn't he do? The questions were endless. Rich reminded her that he had already gone over all of that with the doctor, physical therapist, and dietitian. Quizzically, Terry stared at Rich and came right out and asked, "Did you write it all down?" Of course, the whole time she had been holding a small notebook marked Dad's Healing Plan on the cover. Inside, every detail was noted, which Rich secretly appreciated. At the end of the day, their father, happy to see his three treasures together, said he was tired and insisted that they all go get something to eat. Just as Rich began to protest, feeling uneasy about spending any more time than necessary alone with the twins, they all agreed, saying that it was a good idea. Saying that was a good idea. It was Rich who broke the silence on the ride home, which was just a few short minutes from the hospital. "I told you I have everything under control, and as you can see, there really isn't much you can do. There's no reason for you to stick around for another week or two," he said. "Rich, we really appreciate everything you've done for Dad. We really do. I don't think you realize, though, how hard it is to take care of someone on a full-time basis. Dad is going to need a lot of care, and it isn't easy to do that alone. Why can't you accept our help? He's our father, too, and we're all responsible," Terry said. "Maybe he doesn't trust us," Tim added. "It's not that," Rich said. "Of course I trust you. He's pushing us away just like he used to," Tim said, again talking to Terry as if Rich wasn't in the car. "He still thinks of us as kids, and he knows what's best for all of us. We're grown-ups now and don't need protecting anymore, Rich." Terry carefully responded, "Rich, we're not going anywhere. It might be best for all of us if you accept that and maybe try to be a little appreciative too. We're doing this for Dad, and we're doing it for you as well," she said. Her words were met with silence. When they got to their father's house, Rich pulled into the driveway to drop them off. He wanted nothing more than to go home and be alone. He certainly didn't want to listen to his brother and sister telling him how he should feel. Although after having a quick bite to eat, he pulled out his guitar and strummed a few chords, hoping music would serve as a distraction. But it was one of those rare times he couldn't get in the groove. Just as his mind was forming a rhythm, his thoughts would interrupt it, and he had to start over. Something was bothering him. Maybe it was Tim and Terry, but he'd always been able to handle them, so he told himself it had to be something else. Was it his dad? He didn't think so. His dad was on the upswing and in good hands, but something was nagging at him. It was the note their mom had left. Just where was she? He thought. Deep in thought, it dawned on him that it wasn't the twins' fault that he wasn't close to them. Maybe it wouldn't have been that way if their situation had been different. When their mom left, the twins automatically turned to each other. After all, they had always been connected as twins. They shared the space in the womb and shared a bedroom together. Rich was always the brother in charge. Suddenly, Rich wanted to know more and he opened his laptop. He logged in and began searching his mother's name on all social media platforms. He looked for relatives who might know where she had gone, but he didn't even find a mention of her associated with any of them. Then he turned to Google, searching her maiden name and married name to no avail. It occurred to him that maybe she had remarried, and in that case, he might not ever be able to find her. After clicking on many search results, he did find a link with her remarried name. The search had left him drained, and he decided to quit for the night, vowing to return to the search soon. Wow. I'm going to pause here. We've got more of this chapter, and uh, that's a wow to find out that your mother is somewhere else and has been for all these years. He's 40 now, and he was very young when she left. So apparently, his father and mother had gotten a divorce, and the mother had left and left no word of where she was. So the twins grew up with Rich, alone with their dad, and their dad was everything to them. And so now all three of them are taking care of their dad after their dad has had a heart attack and has had two stents put in and more than that to rescue him. At least they were able to do the procedure so quickly that they were able to rescue him, because otherwise he already had some heart damage, and if he had had that damage going on for any longer, he would have been deprived of oxygen to his brain and had brain damage or even worse. So that is where we are in the story right now. We will find out about Mindy next week and see how you are doing too. I'd like to say hello to John Clark, Tom Krebs, Liz Rose Cantara, AC Rosita, and all the others, Mandy Alexi, Colleen B. Dracos, Gina Putoff. See you later, okay? Old Kinderhook!